treated more like a traditional
Yeah.
page with an offer that matches what they saw in the ad, or even from email, you can send them directly with a completely different version of your product page. So I think there's a lot of creativity there and a lot that the industry can learn from the ad.
Welcome back to another episode of Quick to Buy. Today I'm joined by Linda Bustos, the founder of Ecom Ideas. In the last 18 years, she's had a wealth of experience in the ecom industry, having worked as an ecom blogger, a consultant, a VP of e-commerce, and for 8 years, she was even a content publisher at the Get Elastic blog, covering lots of topics and trends and UX and technology, but that's not all. She actually has her own venture now called Ecom Ideas, which is a super helpful database with lots of different tips on ecom features, CRO ideas from the homepage to check out and more. So that's why I thought she'd make the perfect guest today to talk about all things ecom trends with. Linda, thank you so much for being my guest today on Click to Buy.
Thanks, Becca. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I would love, obviously, I've heard of you. I've seen lots of your tips on LinkedIn, but just to give everyone maybe a little bit more of a background about what you do and maybe what it takes to keep, especially publishing all this content, I'd love to know what inspired you to found and create Ecom Ideas.
Well, you mentioned I used to run a blog called Get Elastic, and that was kind of Barbie's dream job for me because it's part of it is being completely immersed in the community on social media,
Mhm.
which is awesome, especially when you work from home and always have. But also, just the creative part of it, of being able to put together stories and, go out there and always be hunting for what e-commerce practitioners are doing, what's cool, what's fresh, what's notable, what solves problems. So that was my job for 8 years, and I missed it. So I wanted to kind of
Yeah.
reboot that project and vibe, but this time I'm doing it on my own.
I love that. Taking kind of what you already were enjoying doing and now making it your full-time gig again. Really cool. Well, I saw actually on LinkedIn the other day in your bio, I working in content marketing myself, I really appreciate when people, have these things about their personal brand that you wrote that you're kind of like an e-commerce marketing like truffle pig because you're always on the lookout for the latest tips and trends. I would love it if you could share with our audience what are some of the latest ecom features or things that you've seen that you think are really essential to try out now.
Well, I guess it's kind of like when you're gathering truffles in the real world, right? You're going to get some bigger, juicier ones and some smaller,
Hmm.
maybe less exciting ones, but they're all truffles. So I go out there and I just try and look for what's the outliers. I think everybody who's been in the industry for more than 2 years has pretty much seen the 80-20. You see what's common, what's expected. And every once in a while, you stumble upon a really cool way to solve a problem or a really cool implementation or a really nice UI pattern. And when I find those things, I'm like, all right, screenshot, clip. And then I want to share them, just like what you would do on a Slack channel internally with your team. I want to give a pipeline of those kind of things so that when you're working on something in the moment, you've got a bunch of ideas. So that's where the whole truffle pig kind of idea comes from, is that you've got to go out in the forest and sometimes it takes a while to find something interesting.
Yeah. I love that. I love your analogy as well as sometimes you're maybe finding a juicier truffle. Sometimes you find something else that's still a truffle, maybe not as highbrow, but we still love it.
It's funny because sometimes what I think is a big juicy one doesn't go anywhere when I
Mhm.
share it. People are like, didn't care. And then I'm surprised sometimes with something I think is maybe a less interesting one and people like it. So you just really can't predict.
Yeah, such is the life of a marketer for sure. Every time you make something and spend hours on it, they're like, it's okay. And then something you just copy, do a little edit on, that's what blows up every time.
Have you ever seen those cartoons that kind of make fun of this, where they'll be I think Marketoonis did one where there's a guy in a boardroom with on the whiteboard going okay, this month let's go viral. Let's create a piece of content that's going to go viral. It's that easy.
Absolutely. I
Oh,
actually, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember where I saw this, but somebody said like if your boss ever asks you to go viral, you should say that you should be bacterial because then you can kind of stick around a little longer.
Oh, I
Maybe
like
it's not as big of a hit. Yeah, so
it.
I don't know if you have any like bacterial trends you've seen lately that maybe were a hit on something you shared or something you're going to share soon.
Well, I think we want to be parasitic, right? We want to actually live
Yeah.
inside the brain.
Okay, I like
Like,
it.
I found like there's a couple things that the community, like if we just talk about like the traction and the popularity of individual posts, like one of them that did really well was Chat GPT feature baked
Mm,
into a product page. And I'm also noticing on the Ecom Ideas website, the most like trafficked sections of it is product detail page. So that tells me that anything that's AI related that enhances a product detail page that gives you another way to like really engage at that touch point is important because I think product pages are like the most visited on an e-commerce site and everyone's trying to, make them as best as they could be.
oh, that's super interesting. With in terms of like AI, how did you see that people have tried to incorporate this into their PDPs? Like, was there anything that kind of stood out, or is it kind of like this is just the goal right now? We're all looking for a solution.
Yeah, I love that example because it's an app called Albi, and they worked with a big company
Okay.
called Evo. They're kind of like an REI or like
Mm-hmm.
a sporting retailer. They carry lots of different brands, lots of different categories. And they put the work in, they tested this for 6 months to 12 months, where they started originally with a little, chat bot pop-up sales assistant, right? And I think there are a lot of tools out there that start with that use case, and they found that that didn't work. Customers actually weren't asking for that, but they also treated it like it was a customer service bot. So then they're like, okay, we're not
Mm-hmm.
giving up on this idea, but let's try it in different UI patterns, different implementations, different everything. And they finally found one that worked exceptionally well, which was putting the conversational piece right underneath the product gallery, down where you would find traditionally like description accordions and everything like that, and proactively serving specific types of questions. So you're able to then pick, about attributes of like the example I shared was a surfboard, but if it's apparel, it could be about the connection or, the it's running gear, you want to know about certain different kinds of attributes and values of the product. So they didn't give up and they kept testing it and they kept, you know, getting customers success, customer CSAT, right? What's
Mm-hmm.
that? Customer satisfaction. They
Yes,
engaged
there we go.
customers. They didn't just spray and pray like a lot of apps or tools out there. You kind of use them as is and you plug them into the site, and then nobody really follows up with it to see. I mean, they might look at conversion. Let's do an A/B test with
Mm-hmm.
and without, but they don't think about, well, maybe the idea still has legs. It didn't work in this A/B test. Let's try and refine the actual solution or the implementation, or let's rework our hypothesis a little bit. So I was really impressed by that case.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting how you mentioned that they knew that they had this idea that they wanted to incorporate, but looking at kind of like other factors, because ultimately, I think most ecom brands they want that conversion. That's the thing they're looking at. But it sounds like this case was kind of like playing the long game because they really had this hunch that this could maybe work in the right kind of application. So I think that's a kind of a maybe a nice takeaway for brands to think sometimes out of the box or don't be afraid to try new solutions. Maybe that can help you achieve that goal that you have.
Yeah. And it's also perfectly okay if you're a merchant to lean back and wait for
Mhm.
other people to try and test things and perfect the solution before you take on the risk. I think that's a perfectly good
Mhm.
follower strategy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good one as well. It's actually super cool that you just chatted about PDPs because I work for Instant, who sponsor the podcast, and we just this week launched our own custom PDP tool. So it doesn't use AI, but that's definitely been something on my mind. So I would love to hear if you have any like other features or trends you've seen in the space around PDPs? Because right now we're all about trying to find like tips for helping people to find resources when building their own kind of PDPs, or how can they customize it to really make either like a more personalized experience or maybe something that is unique from the competition.
Yeah, it's interesting because PDPs are often the entry pages. And then you can have them
Mm-hmm.
entering from organic search or organic social and also from paid ads, which may have a completely different look and feel, right? Being treated more like a traditional
Yeah.
page with an offer that matches what they saw in the ad, or even from email, you can send them directly with a completely different version of your product page. So I think there's a lot of creativity there and a lot that the industry can learn from the ad,
Mm-hmm.
what do you call that? Performance, demand generation, growth.
Yes.
Because they're
Yeah.
like the hyper experimenters and, really hyper focused. Whereas usually on an e-commerce team, you build a template and then everything gets loaded up into the same template. So I think smaller
Mm.
like D2C brands or smaller sites actually have an advantage over the big Walmarts of the world and the big, big, big sites where they can actually, if you're selling your own brand, you're much closer to the product and you can develop more richer, like I'm seeing with D2C sites, a lot of like even just compare tables between their own products or
Mm.
between them and similar competitors, which is just too much to build if you're like a drugstore that's selling all different kinds of stuff. You're not going to hire the people to like build that rich content. But if you're a brand yourself, you can get your own marketers, your own conversion people, your own copywriters to really tell the product story, not just the brand story. So I'm seeing a lot of creativity on PDPs, a lot of product demonstration videos put in the right touch points, a lot of cross sell and upsell strategies that you can use to build bundles on a PDP. Definitely social proof is huge. So not just reviews at the bottom, but I'm starting to see more like social media widgets getting embedded in
Mm.
either like right by the buy button or right below. So it's this more kind of Instagram and TikTok shopping like feel. A lot more rich media, videos, animations, auto rotating products. All of that is enhancing PDPs that we didn't see like 5 or 6 years ago.
Wow, thanks for sharing all those examples. I think like that's awesome. Those are all great suggestions on things you can add. We've definitely noticed that social media seems to be a thing that people are trying to incorporate in many different ways, like across their Shopify site. Especially considering that there's all these trends of adding more rich content. I'm a bit curious considering like the rise in kind of mobile traffic when people are online shopping, or the preference to kind of shop on your smartphone. For example, one of our customers, Prodigy Disc, they gave me a little peek under the hood at some of their stats, and they had almost 70% of their site traffic was from mobile users. So I'm really curious if you've seen any kind of design trends in terms of like optimizing parts of your ecom store for like mobile performance. Like if there's anything you've seen specifically for like either their like shopping site app or their ads or on the any sort of part of their store themselves, anything maybe that would be interesting to highlight?
Yeah, the unfortunate reality is that desktop gets all the fun. More real estate
Yeah.
and more interactivity too. You can do hover effects, you can do a lot more than you
Hmm.
can with mobile. And mobile, you really have to focus on that first screen, that above the fold real estate. And that gets tricky when images need to be large and need to fill up the big thing, but then you also want to do a lot of stuff with your buy docs, and then you want to do a lot of stuff with what we just talked about, the video and other enriching content below. So that scroll depth and encouraging people to keep scrolling. So not to design elements where it looks like it's the end of the page when really there's a lot more to get to. Making
Hmm.
sure that important things that help support the buy box, such as cross sell and upsell, do you put them above the cart button or below? Like all those things need to be A/B tested. But what I'm starting to see more and more, it's working well on mobile product pages, is like it's harder. I'm finding so much
Yeah.
on desktop that I will always go and test it on mobile and then go, oh, it's gone. It doesn't work on mobile. But the sites that are doing it well figure out how to get that enriched content, that whether it be like the social videos that we talked about or whatever, like somewhere near that full cutoff where it's
Okay.
seen, but it also doesn't like obscure the buy box.
Absolutely. Thanks for those tips. And I think you make a good point. Like, it's so easy to make something so beautiful and dynamic on desktop. But I think indeed the trick is how do you take those things that you like that can still work when it's that smaller screen size? So I think your tip about getting that above the fold section is probably a pretty good takeaway for people who are, especially small brands, like you mentioned. Like, if you have the time to do it yourself and have that kind of like flexibility to try these different ideas, I think that's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, and using things like accordion effects, like expand and collapse,
Mm,
and styling those call to actions. That's one way to get more compact and scannable on a PDP, but still have all the content there.
gotcha. So I actually was just kind of inspired for another question. So hearing all these great tips that you have on what's trending now. So I mentioned in your background that you've been working in the field for quite some time in publishing content. I'm really curious if like there's anything trend that you've seen since you kind of started that is still kind of true today, because I'm sure there's been a lot of things that are like popping up recently, but is there anything that you've seen that you're like, wow, I was writing about that, for 8 years back in the day, and now I'm still seeing this as relevant as ever.
That's really interesting because right around the time when I left Get Elastic, that was before Shopify Plus. It was right on the cusp
Mm,
of it. So if you were on Shopify, you really were a mom and pop shop. You were an independent entrepreneur. You were not a D2C brand or a global brand or an omni-channel brand at all. So that's been the biggest change. And so much has changed since then. So I see some of the like the big, like all the interesting use cases and examples that I found were like the Internet Retailer Top 100, and they're still
yeah.
on their Salesforce Commerce Cloud or their Magento or their legacy e-commerce platform, which kind of ties them to not doing innovative things. So I can say the biggest
Mm,
change in the last 6 years, maybe even less than that, is that Shopify has become such a very front end flexible platform where all these cool new innovations people can develop. They can use it with Liquid, or they can go on a headless version of Shopify, or they can do it with an app. And that's where I'm seeing all the innovation, to be perfectly straight up.
yeah, well, as a Shopify app ourselves, we love to hear it. But I think that's super interesting to hear your perspective, having worked in the field kind of before Shopify Plus was really like taking off, and now kind of seeing how things have adapted. I'm also kind of curious and more of like a pop culture thing. Recently, I've seen so many celebrities launch their celebrity brand on Shopify, and you see like they're also constantly posting like, look, like Beyonce's on Shopify, or like The Rock, or things like this. Do you
Mhm.
think there's anything that like you've seen, I don't know if you've seen any of these examples I'm talking about, that like feature wise could be interesting for a smaller brand that they could take away from some of these like celebrity examples?
Yeah, like so Beyonce, you mentioned her Sacred brand.
Mm-hmm.
They have these product pages where every single product page is kind of like a UFO. She's selling like cream in a jar, right? And it floats
Yeah,
in from the
yeah.
side and it's like spinning and then it lands like a UFO, right? And then
Whoa.
there's an animation where the product comes in. It's a really slow loading page, so I don't suggest people follow and
Mm.
replicate it. But I'm seeing a lot of like creativity, like the art directors and the creative directors taking risk. Yeezy is another example where if you go to that site, it's all stripped down. It's like this brutalist, minimalist, 90s grainy graphics with like nothing there. And it's taking a design risk, like it breaks all the conversion optimization best practices. But I think some of these big celebrity brands will be able to sell no matter what the user experience risks that they take are. They're
Mm.
going to sell, especially if they're the only channel where you can get them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity going into the D2C brand experiences now. Lots of animations, lots of whiz bang. Mr. Beast is another example. Like his site, and he sells out every single launch that he does, and he doesn't have the most, best practicey site. There's a lot of, clashing colors and a lot of animated stuff. But I think also this is my hypothesis, is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I mean, are going to be able to figure out the web. And if you really want something, you'll bang your head against the wall to get through and find the cart button and get through all the stuff, because it's kind of like playing a video game. It's kind of like a challenge. Can you get from A to B? So a lot of some of
Yeah,
the
they're
old
like,
best
we
practices,
want more friction.
yeah. I mean, some of the best practices from, the earlier era was always have the hamburger menu looking a specific way with a label underneath and make everything super obvious. Maybe that's going away. I don't know.
Mm.
I need more data, but that's my hypothesis that people are going to be able to figure out your crazy, cool, interactive, spicy website if they really love the product enough, that is.
I love that, and I also think that would make an amazing T-shirt for you. I need more data, but that's my hypothesis. I like that for quantifying this maybe breaking trend. You heard it here first. I love that so much. Well, I definitely want to make sure that we have time for a segment that I love to call a click-worthy tip. So this is something that can come from either your professional experience or can be something you've seen that is unique, maybe something that you really find could be really helpful for like any sort of e-commerce merchant or marketer out there, that you could kind of walk us through the way that you'd approach something in e-commerce. So it can be, the field is wide open there, but I would love to hear your top kind of click-worthy tip on helping people with their customer experience or conversion funnel.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very, very good question, and it could potentially have a bunch of answers. I think that
Oh
there's some
yeah.
some things that really apply to apparel that I would
Hmm.
suggest, and then others to, different non-apparel. I guess there's two worlds. There's Shopify and non-Shopify. There's apparel and non-apparel. That's it. We're binary. But yeah, I think I love visual search. I think it's one of the most underused capabilities for e-commerce right now. There's some sites that are really pushing forward, but it's really great for product recommendations because it's a search API that looks at your product images and does visual matching like with like. And I'm seeing a lot of that working out nicely. Like one really great use case is when a product is out of stock. And it doesn't mean the entire product is out of stock. It can just be that color variant or that size variant for the individual user. And so if you can save that customer journey in two ways, first of all, get them really quickly to visually similar products that are available in their actual size that they want, you've now solved a problem for the customer that they don't have to, especially on mobile, go back to the little
Yeah.
hamburger menu, fiddle and struggle through mobile filters which suck and like mobile product lists which are harder to use. Just collapsing that journey and using visual search to surface relevant
Mm.
products, I think, is money. And I'm seeing it in non-apparel stuff too, right? Like Sephora's using it. Maybe not so much on the visual, but they have like a more like this. So they're probably doing it with attributes or other types of product data, not necessarily images. But there's definitely applications for like home decor, style attributes, and B2B. There's probably millions of use cases where you can use visual search. Obviously, apparel is like the primo use case. But yeah, I love that. And
Mhm.
there's a bunch of different vendors out there that have that tool ready and available.
I think that's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that with us. It's so funny because I'm going to an event soon and I needed a specific like color dress to match like the dress code. And I finally, found the one I wanted, but it was out of my size. But I had that exact experience where I was like just about to leave and it was like, what about these three, which almost perfectly, fit what I was looking for. So I think like if brands can kind of have that magic sauce by using all the stuff that they can work with to capture that conversion, I think that's a great way and a great tip to kind of implement to try to indeed capture all those leads kind of before they go somewhere else to find whatever it is they were looking for.
And the other use case is, so you're mentioning
Hmm.
shopping for yourself. Like maybe you have a
Yeah.
jacket or a pair of shoes or something from seasons past that have now worn themselves out.
Mm.
And you're like, oh, I'd like to find something new that's similar to this. Those visual search tools also let you snap a photo of just something IRL and, put it up there and search a catalog that way.
I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty great idea as well, especially because I know there's some things that, you buy it once and you just fall in love with it and you keep wanting that same feel. I don't know, at least for me, I always have that one pair of shoes that I wear maybe a little bit too long because I'm determined to find like a similar pair the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. We like what we like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Linda, I have loved having you on here today, and it's been so great to chat with you and hear all of your different kind of tips and trends and ideas. But before we wrap this up, I would love for you to let our audience know where they can find you when they're not listening to your great advice on this podcast.
Well, I'm posting every single day, including weekends and holidays, on the Ecom
Hmm.
Ideas LinkedIn page. So you can find
Yes.
that at LinkedIn/Ecom Ideas 1M, because now I found out that there's another domain and another brand with two M's, Ecom Ideas, but I'm one.
Oh, no.
And then if you want to just go and drill down by topic, you're focused on something, go to ecomideas.com. All the social stuff and more is there on the main site.
There you go. Well, definitely be sure to check it out. I know I personally have looked there when I was looking for some inspiration for giving some tips to a newsletter that I work on. But I've also seen that I think you are about to launch a newsletter, or have you launched that newsletter? I think I saw on your LinkedIn recently.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
launching the third edition next week, so it's very,
All
very new.
right. So be sure to subscribe if you want those tips in your inbox as well. Well, Linda, thank you so much for being a great guest here today on Click to Buy. We covered a little bit of everything, lots of exciting trending tips in ecom. And of course, I wouldn't be a good marketer myself if I didn't say, please, if you're still listening, thank you very much, first of all. And second of all, please like and subscribe to this podcast and leave us a comment if you have any questions about anything that was discussed. We'll try to point you in the right direction. And until next time, thanks for being on Click to Buy, Linda, and thank you everyone for tuning in.